Harry Smith, CBS News. The people who danced to the music at Woodstock included hippies and yippies, the just plain curious and just plain folks, different groups belonging to the same generation, with different tastes in rock music.
There was really a sense that you could try anything, so that you had bands like Sly and the Family Stone that were really pulling together this kind of very compelling fusion of funk and rock and soul music.
Anthony Dee Curtis is a music critic for Rolling Stone magazine.
You had folkier acts like, Joan Baez.
Sweet Sir Galahad.
You had The Who, of course, one of the giants of rock music. When the album came out, there was a lot of poo-pooing of the performances. Finally, I don't think that matters very much. I mean, it sort of seems to me more like what the spirit of the event was like. The Jefferson Airplane coming on at dawn, playing Volunteers of America. You had a spectacular performance like Jimi Hendrix's version of the Star-Spangled Banner, which suggested this new definition of what America is. Hendrix's performance, which was wild and violent and visionary, really seemed to get at that in a very gripping way.
Dee Curtis says the different types of music played at Woodstock symbolized the feeling that anything was possible in 1969. And even if there wasn't going to be an actual revolution, things in America weren't ever going to be quite the same. I'm Harry Smith, CBS News.
I'm Tom Hewell in KNX News Central. Good morning, Southern California.
At Woodstock Music and Art Fair, 300,000 at Folk Rock.
We had such awesome responsibility that the only way we could handle it was to give it back to them.
Bill Levinski worked at Woodstock as a troubleshooter.
We kept reminding them that the whole world was watching them, and that if we all helped each other, we could get out of it okay. And we made it.
500,000 kids can get together and have 3 days of fun and music.
Nathan Brenowitz.
Another thing that I always remember is my mother's face when I came home. The first thing when I walked in the door, she said, "Take a shower."
I'm Judy Muller, CBS News.
69 degrees in Hollywood.
I'm Judy Muller, CBS News. It's 1989 that's going to be a good year for several bands that played at Woodstock, including The Who.
Go out to the Who concert, on this latest tour, you're going to find people of all ages and a lot of kids. They're still one of the biggest things going.
Doug Herzog is a vice president at MTV.
The Grateful Dead played it, at Woodstock, although they weren't in the film. And you go out to their shows and you see everybody from 45-year-old ex-hippies to 12 and 13-year-olds who are just getting into it for the first time.
I'm just grateful I got to see him before he's dead, no pun intended.
Stephen Moorer is 19.
I never thought I'd get to go see The Who, but I did, they all had gray hair, So it doesn't bother me a bit. They were still amazing, and I didn't look at it like, oh, I'm going to see them, but they're old. I was gung-ho about it,
Why are teenagers gung-ho about groups that played for their parents at Woodstock?
Any fool can write a song nowadays, and, lyrics don't mean anything.
Sabra Pegleri is also 19.
That's good, but there's no imagination whatsoever, as far as I'm concerned. It's just not like it used to be, and I wish to God that I was around then.
National radio personality Bruce Morrow was around then.
The Woodstock music really was a Paul Revere protest. It was a bell ringer. The British are coming. The British are coming. Get your guns. Let's go. Let's fight them. Let's get this thing straightened out. Today's music, it's over. We've killed ourselves. We're doomed. Lay down. I'm going to step on your head. That's ridiculous. It is not honest poetry. Honest poetry will always give people hope.
So in the summer of 1989, you can still find groups like Yasgur's Farm, playing 20-year-old music to 20-year-old crowds in the New York area. Band leader Lenny Molinari.
It wasn't some formula. It was from your heart, from your soul. You wrote your music, and you had no restrictions. You weren't worried about a 2-minute song. You weren't worried about if they were going to dance to it. You weren't worried about anything but your statement creatively. And that just does not seem to be there at the moment.
I'm Judy Muller, CBS News.
Woodstock, Generation of Change, a 15-part series. I'm Harry Smith, CBS News. You can still find music in the streets if you visit the New York town where the idea for the Woodstock Festival was born. It's still a place to create.
I don't know what it is, something in the air, man, something in the food, I don't know, something in the drinking water, but I write more songs here in 1 week than I write in New York City in 6 months, and that's the truth.
Singer-songwriter Benny Mardones believes the town's live and let live attitude adds to its creative spirit.
The spirit of the Woodstock Festival began in the town of Woodstock.
Gary Moore attended the festival and moved to Woodstock in the mid-70s.
Jimi Hendrix lived there. Bob Dylan lived there for a while. They lived there, or they visited, they played free gigs there, and there was always a sense that this was a place to go where you could hear an outdoor concert.
Day, who calls himself a professional hippie, came here in 1970.
Woodstock is the Bethlehem of the now age. It was appointed and anointed that by the Spirit that showed us all that this was possible, that we could have peace, love, and music for 3 days, and did have.
The people of Woodstock have never been entirely comfortable with the notoriety the festival brought them.
So many tourists on the weekends, you know? It's just like, Woodstock, and I mean, people coming to the store, you know, where was Woodstock? It's 67 miles away. Ah! Go, you know?
All the people flooding in has brought inevitable change, according to Richard Fusco, with the local radio station WDST.
Definitely the character of the town changed. I wouldn't say necessarily for the worse. I would just say it changed as a result of the notoriety that Woodstock received. And as a result of the festival, Woodstock has been and is now, I figure, the best-known small town in the world.
One thing the festival didn't do is give Woodstock an identity crisis. Town Supervisor Brian Hollander.
We've never had a problem with our identity here. We've always been an artists' community, a community where working people and artists and rich people and poor people exist side by side and drink in the same bars and have a good time together. And that particular spirit is here, would be here, even if there never was a Woodstock Festival.
I'm Harry Smith, CBS News.
Let's check on some.
Generation of Change, a 15-part series. I'm Harry Smith, CBS News.
I, Richard Billhouse Nixon, do solemnly swear.
1969 began with a new administration in Washington and a renewed hope that the United States might recover from the horrors of the 60s. Deaths of heroes, uprisings and suppressions, blood in the streets of Chicago and Saigon.
All right, stay low. Put your head down, you liable to lose.
It was not meant to be. In the spring of 1969, U.S. forces in Vietnam were at an all-time high, and some 300 colleges and universities became marching grounds for demonstrations. In July, a car driven by Senator Edward Kennedy plunged into a pond on an island called Chappaquiddick.
Mary Jo Kopechne, riding with the senator, was killed.
Just 2 days later, man's first landing on the moon helped lift America's spirits.
Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed.
Then, violence at home took on a new dimension, with the murders of 5 people by a cult headed by Charles Manson.
Nooses were around the necks of Miss Tate and Sebring, with the rope connecting them.
There was an increasing feeling that America was skidding toward some sort of end of history.
Todd Gitlin is a professor of sociology at the University of California at Berkeley.
Riots, war, drugs, sets, all these added up to the sense that the old culture was played out. And Woodstock offered itself at that moment.
I'm going off the country, where do you wanna go? I'm going to some place where I've never been before.
Someplace where a generation had never been before was Woodstock, a music festival 20 years ago this week in upstate New York that turned into a party for the richest, best educated, and largest American generation ever. Historian Arthur Schlesinger.
Never before, never since has there been such an injection of young people into the population. I think that was one reason why they had a sense of themselves as a separate class, trying to find its own culture and its own identity.
Woodstock became a place where nearly 500,000 young people could find their own identity and celebrate peace in a decade of violence. I'm Harry Smith, CBS News.
Glendale Music.
Cuts. Coming up today on Classic Cuts, Country Joe and the Fish guitarist Barry Melton gives us a bird's eye view of the Woodstock Festival, and he tells us the origin of the Feel Like I'm Fixin' to Die rag right after this.
Gas.
Welcome warmly, Country Joe and the Fish.
Give me an F!
We really didn't know exactly what we were doing, and that carried a little bit of danger. You know, they had planned for 30,000 people. They broke down the gate, and the other 470,000 went for free.
And it's 1, 2, 3. What are we fighting for? Don't ask me, I don't give a damn. The next stop is Vietnam.
And we had a lot to do with changing our time.
Suck to, yeah. All your love is like a rainbow. Marijuana! All right.
Ladies and gentlemen, Country Joe McDonald.
97.1 KLSX Classic Cuts. Woodstock started 20 years ago today, and one of the many highlights of Woodstock was Country Joe McDonald's spirited rendition of the Fish Cheer, which has swearing in it, so I can't play it for you. However, we were able to ask Fish guitarist Barry Melton about the origin of the Feel Like I'm Fixin' to Die rag, the anti-Vietnam War anthem that usually followed the Fish Cheer, as it did on the stage of Woodstock.
I Feel Like I'm Fixin' to Die, the first time that we recorded that song was in 1965. We recorded it as a jug band for the first teach-ins against the Vietnam War that were held at the University of California in Berkeley in 1965. We put the record out on our own record label, Rag Baby, and it was the first talking issue of Rag Baby magazine, which was a magazine that Joe published in Berkeley in 1965. And Joe and I set up a table at the demonstrations and sold them for $1 a piece. We sat there at the table. We had like a little loudspeaker kit, and we stood on the table and we sang and played to draw people over to sell them our records for $1 each.
Well, come on, all of you big strong men. Uncle Sam needs your help again. Got himself in a terrible jam way down yonder in Vietnam. Put down your books and pick up a gun. We're gonna have a whole lot of fun. And it's 1, 2, 3. What are we fighting for? Don't ask me, I don't give a damn. The next stop is Vietnam. And it's 5, 6, 7. Open up the pearly gates. Well, there ain't no time to wonder why. We're all gonna die. Now come on, Wall Street, don't be slow. Why, man, this is war a go-go. There's plenty good money to be made, supplying the army with the tools of the trade. Just hope and pray that if they drop the bomb, they drop it on the Viet Cong. And it's 1, 2, 3. What are we fighting for? Don't ask me, I don't give a damn. The next stop is Vietnam. And it's 5, 6, 7. Open up the pearly gates. Well, ain't no time to wonder why. We're all gonna die. Now come on, generals, let's move fast.
97.1 KLSX Classic Cuts, minus the fish cheer. That was Country Joe McDonald and the Feel Like I'm Fixin' to Die rag. Like many of the performers, Country Joe and the Fish guitarist Barry Melton got his first glimpse of the Woodstock Festival from the air. He recalls his impressions both coming to and leaving the festival site.
I had taken a helicopter over to the site because they were making helicopters available for the performers, and I saw the crowd from the air. And it was not only the crowd that was within eye view of the stage, it was throughout the woods and beyond. You could see thousands and thousands and thousands of people, and from the helicopter's view you could see traffic clogging the roads and pouring in. And the next day I also got in the helicopter, but they told you when you went in on the helicopter they might not be able to get you out because the helicopters were being used for emergency services, more and more and more and more taxed. And then finally, no performers could get helicopters, and the helicopters had been entirely dedicated to medical evacuation and things like that. But it was a stupendous sight, and I knew that whatever was taking place was really an incredible historical event.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome warmly Country Joe and the Fish.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. We're certainly delighted to be here today. I'd like to start off my portion of the show by giving you a taste of a little something we call rock and soul music.
Classic Cuts, 97.1 KLSX. That was the somewhat abbreviated version of Country Joe and the Fish's rock and soul music from the Woodstock album. Tomorrow, Carlos Santana looks at Woodstock in a social context, and Santana drummer Mike Shreve remembers watching himself in the Woodstock movie for the very first time on Classic Cuts. This is Roz. We'll have your midday